I love it. I love it. You look great. Good morning. I'd like to have your attention for just a couple of minutes. Some of you know that, first of all, I'm Horace Griffin, and I'm the Associate Priest for Pastoral Care here at St. Luke's Episcopal Church. Welcome all. Some of you know that last night there was a gun shooting in Philadelphia that left 3 dead and 14 were shot. So I just want us to take just a moment to pause in silence as we remember those victims and remember our country. God be with you. Let us pray. God of Abraham and Sarah, God of our sisters Hagar and Mary, and brothers Buddha, Muhammad, gods of the East and Mahatma Gandhi, God of our Savior Jesus Christ and Holy Spirit, God of peace and justice, and the God of our ancestors who paved the way for our being in this place this afternoon. In this human family, the psalmist acknowledged that we are wonderfully made by you, bodies that you gave us as holy temples to be honored, loved, and respected by ourselves and others. We come acknowledging that we need deliverance from the evil of gun violence that destroy precious bodies, the evil of gun idolatry, and any idol that turns us away from you and each other. In your providential care, heal our land and heal us physically, spiritually, and mentally. As we gather this morning to listen and learn how we restore the valuing of life and be witnesses that guns, violence, and hatred are not life-giving, but will continue to lead us down a destructive path. Jesus reminds us in the Gospels that if we live by the sword, we will die by the sword. And such a lifestyle will be visited upon the most innocent, our children. So we gather because we care to be more mindful and vigilant in our work to eradicate this use of assault weapons in a civilized society that destroys the beautiful human life that you give us. Stir in us the courage and willingness to right this wrong and never make peace with oppression. Adorn us this day with a crown of knowledge for gun safety and a scepter of boldness to speak when this conversation is not popular, and call and elect faith and political leaders who will be advocates of peace, safety, and common sense. You call us every day of our lives to heal those who are broken and give hope to those being consumed with despair. May we never lose sight of the many ways that you have always worked through responsible people of this church, city, and country to build a beloved community, koinonia, preached by a prophet of our city, Atlanta, Martin Luther King Jr. Help us to always to listen to each other and speak the truth in love. I ask all these blessings, God, in your many holy names, and bless this food that we will do that will. Amen.
Thank you, Horace. Thanks, Horace. So my name is Marty Breen, and I'm here to welcome you all to St. Luke's. We are so glad that you were able to join us today, either in person or for those of you that are online. If you are in Bud Hall and this is your first time at St. Luke's and you're looking for the facilities, they're through this door and to your right, and they're right there. I wanted to introduce myself and tell you something about what Faith and Advocacy Network, or FAN, is doing. We have been celebrating the Wear Orange for the past few years through the pandemic, and we're so glad to be able to gather in person this year for it. So we want to recognize our co-hosts for this event, our partners at Ebenezer Baptist Church and the Temple's Rothschild Center for Social Justice. So thank you to both Ebenezer and the Temple for spreading the word and helping in this struggle that people of faith need to keep on so that we can see justice and peace in our time. So thank you so much. And now Ann Kramer will introduce our speaker.
It's still good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's so much fun to see, all of the orange. Thank you all for wearing your orange and for coming to be a part of this amazing day. I'm Ann Kramer. At St. Luke's, I have the honor of being the convener for our Community Ministries Council, of which Faith and Advocacy Network, FAN, is a major part of the work. But I come to you today as a longtime board member of our Atlanta Public Broadcasting System affiliate, WABE, amplifying Atlanta every day. Okay, right, Lisa, I've got to say it. WABE, amplifying Atlanta every day on radio, TV, and digital. But the most important part of that is that as a board member and as past chair and currently chair of our advisory council, we come with so much pride, respect, and affection for Lisa Hagen. Lisa, who is our speaker today, as many of you know, is a Pulitzer Prize winner for her work that she did related to No Compromise, which is a part of a whole series that reporters were working on guns across America. And it's been so fabulous to have not only Lisa and the colleague of other 3 reporters, and she calls herself a reporter. I call her a journalist, because she is a person who seeks the truth, reports the truth, no matter what it says. And in that story today, and I will make the caveat, which Lisa will underscore, she is a journalist. She's not a political activist. She's not a faith leader, although she may be a person of faith. But so today she is telling the story, which then hopefully for us will create the path for action. Cute little fun facts. Lisa lived in Hawaii. She got her master's in journalism from CUNY, New York's Graduate School of Journalism. And as she likes to say, shh, she is from Hawaii, but don't ask her about surfing. She can fillet a salmon, and she loves fly fishing. So she's a wonderfully interesting, talented person. So it is a joy and an honor, and so proud of our own Lisa Hagen, the first Pulitzer Prize winning among the NPR crowd, our journalist, Lisa Hagen. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Thanks for saying nice things. Yeah, I do radio, as Anne just mentioned, which means that I don't have to look at the people that I'm talking to most of the time, and I can say things over if I mess them up. So thank you for having me. Also, I am not a visual person, so I don't make slideshows professionally. Again, radio. Please expect a somewhat unpolished visual experience. All right. So when I was approached to come talk to y'all, there was no way to know the timing and when I would be here, in the wake of a number of very high-profile, horrible shootings, including the one in Philadelphia yesterday. I don't really have anything hopeful to say about those shootings or the general public responses to them, which is probably not exactly the type of message you like in a church, but I figured you didn't invite me here to be dishonest. So I'm gonna try to tell you the truth about what I know, about what I've learned, and what I think people should be thinking about when it comes to gun policy and gun culture in this country. Some of you might not love what I'm gonna say, but you asked for it. Okay. So I was 13 when the Columbine shooting happened. So just starting high school, which you can see over on the left there. I was already a morbid, cynical child. I'm 35 now. And the only thing that's changed about the gun debate since that time is that it's gotten worse, and from my perspective, often kind of irrelevant to what I think is going on. I'm gonna try to explain, but I was also asked to share some experiences from my reporting. In the middle, There, you can see me enjoying my first real reporting job. I was a stringer for the New York Post, which some of you probably know is not like the Washington Post. It's a tabloid. That's probably me on like hour 6 of a blizzard waiting outside what I assume is a recently dead celebrity's Manhattan apartment. It was not really the pillar of democracy style of reporting that I had been dreaming about when I wanted to go to journalism school. But this is the job I got. I ran around on the streets of New York chasing this stuff. I learned things. It's fine. What I did think about when becoming a journalist was shows like This American Life, which I don't know if y'all listen to. I listened to like hours of archives of that show, and I was really always moved by the sounds of real people's voices, the music. It seemed kind of magical that you can make someone feel something, maybe make them kinder and smarter, and heal the world, make it a better. Okay, yep. Right, so that's why I wanted to be a journalist. So let's pop back to our visual timeline. On the right is me after a few years of doing my dream job. I'm kidding, I just don't like taking pictures and I think that's funny. But, okay, so that's me. Gonna get back to guns and violence and the script of horrible talking points that follow all these shootings like clockwork. You probably all know this script like I do. We have all watched it evolve over decades into a very finely choreographed production. You got thoughts and prayers, liberal Twitter, hurling insults, saying everyone's a hypocrite. The pro-gun right does its like knee-jerk, now is not the time for politics. The real answer is give everyone guns. Each one of those statements is designed almost exclusively for people who share the same beliefs. So it's not really doing much to convince people about changing their minds. If we have a Democratic president, he may give a speech about how nice it would be if we improved background checks and banned assault rifles. And then some reporters will write an article about how there's a House bill in Congress and maybe it'll pass, but probably not. And nothing really new happens each time, except that more families are irreversibly shattered and their communities are traumatized, and about 1 million more guns are sold each one of these big ones. So that's really depressing, and if you're like me, like you kind of go numb to it after a while. Yeah, which is a reasonable response, I think. So y'all invited me here because a couple of years ago I got some grant money to cover guns. And being in Georgia, I'd covered guns before, but I had the time now to immerse myself in the gun rights world here in Georgia. Along with a reporting partner in Missouri, we started to notice that even though it's a very popular boogeyman for most of the left, the National Rifle Association is not actually an all-powerful behemoth dictating gun laws from their evil lair in Fairfax, Virginia. There are obviously notable exceptions to that, but what we found actually, doing the reporting. Oh, is it like an animated? Okay, interesting. Was that it's actually local, state-level gun rights activists who shape the gun laws in a lot of conservative-leaning states like ours. And of course, at the end of the day, it is state gun laws, not federal ones, that have the most direct impact on each of us. So my partner and I honed in on a particular policy idea that even other very staunch gun rights advocates and lawmakers and a lot of law enforcement even thought was pretty ill-advised. It's called constitutional carry. It essentially does away with weapons carry licenses and therefore background checks. In Georgia, it took about 6 years for this policy to go from kind of an extreme fringe concept to being law as of 2 months ago. We're the 25th state to pass a constitutional carry law. Oh, okay, now it's animating, great. Move on, come on, there we go. So how did that happen? How, since Columbine in 1999, through all the high-profile mass shootings you can think of, how did half of the states in the country in that time become places where lawmakers decided there should be functionally no government regulation of guns? Whether it's sales, ownership, possession, government shouldn't be involved. What I think I learned as a reporter working on this is that constitutional carry advocates tell a really good, simple story about the world. It's about being brave and noble and battling against an immoral, violent empire. The lover of constitutional carry wants to be peaceful, mind his own business, and be left alone to raise a family, but the evil empire wants to dominate him and everyone he loves, and the empire definitely doesn't want him to have weapons to be able to fight back. Anybody seen Braveheart? If you haven't, it's about a Scottish guy who gets all his freedom-loving Scottish buddies together, and they fight the evil British king and all of his murderous soldiers. And to be clear, if you do believe there should be gun regulation, in this story, you are the British evil empire. And that story is much, much simpler than anything I can do as a journalist. We can't, make it more fun to tell you the truth, which is usually complicated. It's definitely simpler than anything President Biden said in his speech about gun control. And it doesn't matter how wrong or stupid or morally bankrupt you think some of these ideas are, these core ideas that drive a sense of meaning among people who are really absolutist about gun rights. It's like a complete culture already. It exists. It's gonna be incredibly hard to dismantle if that's what you wanna do. Because once you identify with the cool Scottish rebels, you can't trust anything that the evil empire says, right? Why would you? So it's not new that simple stories move people more than complicated ones. Now we have communication tools that definitely help spread simple stories, and I think more importantly, form communities. But I think there's a lot of confusion and frustration and anger from folks who do support more gun regulation. And there's a confusion towards people who want more gun rights. how could anyone look at all this grief and anguish, dead children, heartbroken families, etc.? How do you see that over and over again and not do something? But so when you think about that or wonder about that or hear someone else wonder about it, I want you to think about Braveheart. It's about how the power of a good, simple story can move people. It's not because folks don't have enough information. Sadly, that hurts me, but it's true. Yeah, hold on, lost my place here. It's not about having enough data, it's not about being evil. It's just literally about living in a completely different, simple story that is fun about the world and violence. And the only people you're gonna trust is someone who's reinforcing that story. So this is a really basic idea, but I think it's something that anyone who's working towards gun regulation, anyone wearing orange right now, should understand and integrate into your strategy. Because I see a lot of time and effort being spent on the script, which we talked about. It's the same thing I've been hearing since I was a teenager. And meanwhile, what I've been reporting on and seeing is that there has, behind the scenes, been a very organized, deliberate effort over decades, almost a century, not just to craft this story that is effective, but to build a moral system in which owning guns is a divinely ordained responsibility. They've built infrastructure and been working on securing the levers of power. If you haven't listened to No Compromise, which is a podcast I did, we try to break down the way that this push for power is happening not just in the world of gun rights, but across an entire spectrum of divisive and hugely consequential issues: vaccines, public education policy, collective bargaining, abortion rights, gender identity, sexuality, voting systems, the Supreme Court. That list can go on forever. All these fights are connected by that simple story. And getting to live like William Wallace in Braveheart is very much more enticing than listening to a newscast or a presidential speech or even a pretty fun NPR podcast that you guys should listen to and tell your friends about. And that's been a really hard lesson for me to learn as a journalist. I wanted to do this because I thought stories can make people nicer and smarter. But as an actual journalist, I think I'm legitimately worried at this point that we might be past where that's possible. I don't really know what to do about it, but I do think it helps to identify the problem correctly and understand that it's not just people who think guns solve social problems. All of us are susceptible to simple stories that make us feel valued or useful. The president just tried to tell a very simple story about gun control. Some of you may have been moved by it. The simple story is that Congress might work together and give him a bill to sign, or that banning assault rifles will make these shootings stop, or at least maybe raising the age of who can buy a scary-looking gun will help. The truth is, I think mass shootings, active shootings, drug-related shootings, family murder, suicides, dumb, drunk fights outside a party, all of those problems are unique and a lot more complicated and deeply rooted in culture and the human need for purpose and community than I see us publicly acknowledging as a country. So I just invite all of us to look critically at the scripts that we believe in and understand how that exact same process is happening in the brains and hearts of people working off a completely different script. Okay. As you can tell, we have made it to the portion of my presentation where my dedication to creating a slideshow has declined precipitously. So I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you for your attention. Sorry for being depressing, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much. And if you have not watched the 6 or 7 episodes in this podcast, you must do it. It will open your eyes to so many things that we need to understand. So we would love to hear from you with questions. Okay, Don.
We can just sit silently and meditate also.
Lisa, thank you for being here today. I'm Don Plummer, and
Cool.
my question to you is, yes, no one thing will work. What will work?
I don't know I mean, individual solutions to individual problems locally will help. Paying attention more to state level politics, and I mean, there's been a major rise across the country in state legislatures where I want to say there are like more than 30 state legislatures that are run completely by one party. And what that means is that there's functionally no actual debate happening, and that it didn't used to be like that. So I think definitely, I'm sure you are all working on voting issues. I think that's super important. I get a little irritated when I see people name checking the NRA only, because I think they're becoming less and less relevant. They have lots of money, for sure. I think my solution to it is making sure I understand what's happening on the pro-gun side and why.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marie Fortuna, member here. And some of the reporting has been reflecting on, we're beginning to see a pattern here. And yet the obvious seems not to be talked about, which is we're dealing with young white men and their violence. Would you like to comment on the intersection of that part of the problem, and why are we not hearing more discussion that that is part of the problem that we've got to address?
There are certainly a lot of young or not so young white men who are pretty angry, who have been involved in these shootings. There have been other people too. I mean, certainly the majority are white guys. I think that is a conversation that we've all been having, to be honest. Like, I think it's become sort of a figure of speech to be like, no one's talking about this. But actually, if you go like Google it, there are probably, a million articles about that, which is not to negate your good question, sorry. Yeah, racism, sexism, all the bad isms are involved in all of this stuff. But again, I guess, and of course, that's why it would be nice if there was less access to guns, because sometimes people are mad at innocent people who symbolize something for them. I don't know what to do about it. But I think it is being talked about. I think we also have to try to be empathetic and think about what kind of pain, what kind of environment and family drives someone to want to hurt people and then go through with it. I don't know if that was an answer, but I'm gonna stop talking.
this.
Oh, great.
Probably all hear me.
For the recording, can you,
Well, I'll take it.
here, you guys, there you go. You're right.
Hi, I'm Lisi Stallman, and I'm a member of the Temple and the head of their gun violence prevention group, and have been involved in this movement the better part of 9 years, and am as frustrated as you are. A couple of things that you said: the local pro-gun organizations, Georgia Carry. If you want to know how they think, get on their website. They make the NRA look mild.
The people we reported on made Georgia Carey look mild.
Oh, really?
Just so you
Really?
yeah.
Another thing that's not really mentioned as far as a solution, and it's going to take a shift in politics, is campaign finance reform. Big time. Big time. What bothers me, and I don't know if you can address this, what has bothered me with the assault weapons, and people don't know, people say, ban them, this and that. I don't know if you know this, but AR-15s and AK-47s are considered the same as a hunting rifle, which is why they never needed a permit. In Georgia now, nothing needs a permit, but they never needed a permit, and why they can be bought at 18. It has nothing to do with anything except that they're classified the same as if you're, going out to shoot a deer. And we all know that assault weapons don't leave anything edible when you're shooting animals. So it's something that bothers me, and somebody needs to talk about it.
Can I try to respond?
Sure.
I don't know what the mic situation is. Can you hear me? Hello. Okay. I don't want to do that. I'm gonna hold on for dear life. Assault rifles. First of all, you probably know that assault rifle is a sort of term of art more than it has any sort of specific meaning. And I would actually say assault rifles are, if you listen to the podcast, you hear me talk a little bit about my dad. He was in the Marines for 30 years. He taught me how to shoot. He definitely loved the NRA growing up, very conservative. At this point, he also is just horrified by the availability of assault rifles, for better or worse. But if you are looking at data about gun violence and gun death and gun injury in this country, does anyone know what the actual biggest number is? Suicides. Good job. Yes. Yeah. And so assault rifles, while disturbing and I think enticing for certain people who want to look a certain way or feel scary or big, makes up a pretty small proportion, actually, of the gun deaths and injuries that we deal with in the country. Most researchers who I have spoken to, injury researchers, actually point to something that I didn't hear at all in Biden's speech, which was a little bit disheartening, and it's gun licensing, in addition to background checks. And I'm not advocating for that, I'm just saying that's where the data points being the most significant impact on both homicides and suicides. I understand why people are emotionally activated by that gun, and in both ways. People really like it as a representation of themselves as well. I don't think at the end of the day, if you're trying to save lots and lots of lives, that is necessarily the first fight that should be taken on. Because handguns kill the most people, and suicide kills the most people. I don't know. That's all I wanted to say, I guess.
Hi there.
Hi.
My name is Emily. I'm a member of the community here at St. Luke's. You mentioned several times, this, and I appreciate it because it's really clarifying and important, this story that galvanizes people around, gun rights and the simplicity of the story. And I'm wondering if in your reporting and in your research, have you come across any sort of counter narratives, counter stories, or even just like glimmers or seeds of stories or anything that could galvanize people and potentially unify people around gun control? Any stories that could compete with this narrative that you've told us about? Have you come across any, and do you have any hope for that?
I tried to make it, and then the law passed anyway in this state, and it felt really surreal. I would say something to know is that among at least like shooting ranges and in veterans communities and lots of these communities, there are actually efforts underway to especially prevent suicide and like promote mental health and like talk about maybe you should give your gun to a friend for a little while, that sort of stuff. So I think maybe acknowledging that people who love guns and love gun rights are also worried about some of these things could be a starting point. Yeah, that's the best I got. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Adelaide Steedley, and I'm a member of St. Luke's and the Faith and Advocacy Network, so thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, I live in town, and one day this is last week, I went into the gas station inside to get a couple of things, and while I was in there, about 3 or 4 guys walk in, and 2 of them just had their guns right here, the little handguns, and one dude stayed at the door, while they were walking around and laughing and talking. And I just found myself going, oh, this is how it's going to go down. Here's my money. The next day, there's a sub shop right next to it, and there's a police precinct around the corner. And the next day, I was in the sub shop and getting my sub, and about 5 or 6 cops came in, and half of them were dressed, and half of them were plain clothes. And I just asked the officer next to me, and they were all about my age. And I asked him, I said, these 2 guys were in, is that late? He says, you know what, July 1st, they don't even have to show them. And not only do they not have to show them, but they don't even have to permit for them. And I just frankly had not realized that it had deteriorated this impossibly. And it was interesting because as he was saying that to me, the 4 or 5 officers behind him, who were all big guys that you would want to be sort of in your police force, I suppose, all just stopped in their tracks, and they just were watching this whole conversation. And I was just gobsmacked and embarrassed that I hadn't been involved enough to understand that these folks that are supposed to protect us in our neighborhood are like, we have no idea what we're up against the 1st of July. And I was, in terms of the narration and the history of guns in the United States, policing and controlling has always been such a huge part of that story. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, in your research and your reporting, what has been the impact, particularly in Georgia, of this? Is there any allyship in the law enforcement community? Because they're going to walk into scenarios and situations and not know anything about, they're probably already doing that, but now it's completely legal. And I just didn't know if you had any, saw any alliances in that situation.
I saw things. Yes. Okay, where to start there? Totally. I think I hinted at it here. I've talked to the head of the GBI about some of these issues, and they are more or less fine saying aloud that they don't think these laws are a good idea. They think that it's going to make the community more violent. An exception to that is police agencies are usually headed by police chiefs who are appointed. There's a bit of a political angle to that. You also have a separate sort of culture of law enforcement represented by sheriffs who tend to be way more pro-gun absolutism. So I think, first of all, knowing that there's a difference between different communities of law enforcement, and some of them are certainly concerned about this issue and have been for years. Like, there are plenty of other policies about guns where law enforcement has been like leading the charge of being like, this is dangerous for our officers. We would like to be able to enforce federal law, but we don't have a state law that mirrors it. There's all kinds of examples like this. And I would say, just to like also relate to you on like having your mind kind of blown by the way the laws actually work and the fact that people like wrote them on purpose and people voted for them. I had that experience like 7 years ago when I came to Georgia. I was raised in Hawaii. I lived in New York. This is a very different setting. For years now, it has been totally legal for you to open carry in Georgia, which is, I think, what you saw. So that's not even different anymore. And it was also already illegal for law enforcement to ask to see a permit. I don't know if anyone remembers the story of this guy. I think his name is Jim Cooley. He was a dude who took an AR to Hartsfield-Jackson to like drop his daughter off to go to college. And, you know, he made a YouTube video about it. It was like a whole thing, but he was completely within his rights. He knew that. He was sort of taunting the officers. There's video of this online if you want to go look it up. And this was years ago. And I, went through the whole process of being like, how can this be the law? Oh my God. But literally up until the point that someone fires, pulls a trigger, all that is legal. That's real. That's the situation we live in. It ain't great.
I'm Allison Earls, a member of St. Luke's. And I also, a number of things that just come to mind. People who are pro-life, getting police unions and teachers unions together. Mm-hmm. I think that there's something about patriotism. I mean, yes, there are people who want to be ready to overthrow the government, but there's also a very powerful love of the United States and the flag and military and things like that. I would think that there are a lot of these simple stories that could be, do we love children? Do we support our police? You take everyone who's in the Back the Blue movement. You're going to back the blue? You need to protect the blue from these things. And if what they want is to have access to their guns in the event that they need to overthrow the government, maybe they could have access to their guns in a particular, is there a way to give them assurance that they can have access to their guns, but not their children who are having mental problems having access to their guns?
You would think so. You would think there would be some overlap there. But again, the power of the story that I told you about an individual man who's trying to protect his family, and the government is evil. And governments can be evil. Let's all be realistic about that. Like, I'm not saying the US government and democracy is like the best situation ever, but I mean, I certainly can think of all of the knee-jerk gun rights answers to your questions. They exist. I don't think there have already been scripts created to get around those things. And also, if you believe in something, it doesn't necessarily have to make sense all the time. Yeah.
I'm Al Adams. My remarks are primarily addressed to mass shootings and guns capable of those. About 100 years ago, there were machine guns in use, and they were the instruments of mass shootings, principally.
Talking like prohibition?
Gangsters and so forth and so on. Well, J. Edgar Hoover didn't like that, and so he got a law passed that forbade people from having machine guns, and it's still on the books. And so that's at least one weapon of mass destruction that's not around. Unfortunately, J. Edgar is dead, so he's not going to help us this time. I don't think, with all due respect, that left of center folks can carry the torch for this. It isn't going to happen. We can all have the best intentions and the best motivations. Nobody's going to listen to us.
At the end of the day, we're the British.
They're not going to listen to
Right?
us. Okay, so I don't think the government can solve this problem because it won't solve it. Not because it can't, but it won't. So how do you solve it? With money, lots and lots of money. You go to the manufacturers of these weapons and pay them the equivalent of their profits not to make the weapons. Most of these recent shootings were people who bought guns that had just come from the manufacturers, and they were just old enough to buy them, and they bought them. Then you can do a buyback program that's non-governmental to buy back such guns from people who already own them. Now, maybe they won't sell them. They probably won't use them in the way that we're worried about either, because if they would have already done it. So we've got to stop the flow of these weapons, and it's going to take a lot of money, and the government can't do it, and liberals can't do it.
I agree. Thank you. What I will say is that as you started your story, you were talking about how J. Edgar Hoover got a law passed. That's the part that's broken right now. Like, we can't propose even, like, nothing is going to get through the House. We certainly, there is no possibility in the near future that our state legislature is going to change hands. And I also have found it very confusing when I started getting into this about, like, aren't you patriots? Like, shouldn't you like the government? They don't. The people that I'm talking about anyway. And they are, I think, the thought leaders within the gun rights community. Yeah, I agree that we're not in a place to be able to change things via the current system of law. And when you talk about, or current system of lawmaking, when you talk about money and its importance, I would argue, and I made the argument actually, that money helps, but I think very wealthy parts of the far right have been spending that money for way, way longer, building like actual institutions, funding professorships and colleges, all kinds of things. So this is a much bigger infrastructure than just something that happens in a state legislature. I look at the Supreme Court. I think every single one of the conservative judges has been recommended by the Federalist Society, which is how we get conservative judges now. Like, that infrastructure was built a long time ago with the idea of getting to the point that we are at already. And last thing is gun buybacks have been found to have sort of mixed results and are not super, there's not a lot of evidence that they're all that successful. I think the truth is we know what the answers are. We have really smart people in this country who've been studying this stuff for a long time, and they have like lists, and at the top of the list is gun licensing for how less people get hurt by guns. But the main point is what you're saying is, with the current system sort of hacked in the way that it is, it's not possible actually to get any form of regulation into law. So I think we gotta look at democracy maybe.
So,
Hate to say it.
so Lisa,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's give Lisa a big hand. Yes.
Thank you.
So incredible, thought-provoking, which, by the way, I'm Ray Uttenhove, and I lead our gun violence prevention here at St. Luke's. And we believe so strongly that the only way we're going to change the dynamic that of the environment we're living in is through the faith community taking leadership here. And, you know, the Episcopal Church has taken a stand since the 1970s about safe gun laws. You know, bishops standing for safe gun laws. I mean, we've been so consistent with that. But we cannot do it alone. And that's why our partnership with the Temple and Ebenezer is so critical to what we're doing. And we're so committed to expanding that. Because again, as people of faith, we can have a voice and we must speak out. So I have 3 invitations for you. So the first is, it's, you know, much more traditional about the work we're doing, and that is to join a march next Saturday, March for Our Lives. It starts at noon at Ebenezer and ends at the Capitol, correct? I'm sorry, starts at 1. And so I think it's really important that we show up and that we be present with all of this. And the second invitation, and to Lisa's point, we have got to think about the leaders we are electing. And you know, one of the greatest lessons for me has been that federal elections are important. But I'll tell you, we have to start locally. We have got to start at the state level. And it takes a lot of work. And those people that are controlling this conversation and this environment we're in, they have been working behind the scenes for so long. The other realization, thank you, Lisa Hagen, for me, has been that we are beating our heads against a wall. We are not going to probably change the filibuster. We may not get a federal law passed. But you know what? We have got to get creative. So my invitation to all of you is that we take time, and we'll organize this at St. Luke's, to begin to engage in some conversations that take a different approach. Because I am tired of being discouraged. We're all tired, and we can't. You know, I just read Gabby Gifford said, we must have a voice, even if we have to fight to find the words. And if she can do it, we can do it. If the Dorr brothers can figure out how they can take a small group of people and shift the way this country is thinking about guns, then we, as people of faith, can find a way to change that dynamic, that guns don't save lives. So thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to working with all of you.
Hey, thank you, Ray Utenhove, the second sermon of the day. Thank you for preaching. You know, before we leave, this has been twirling in my head, and I really want us to leave on this note as well, that I love this country, and I love the people here, and we can do better than this. When we look at countries around the world and how they have mental illness too, but they are not going out shooting up tons of people as happening here in this country. So we have to be self-critical. We have to look at ourselves and say, what are we doing that's different? Other countries that have passed laws and they have stopped the mass shootings. I'm thinking of 2 countries, New Zealand and Australia. So I'm unwilling. I know Lisa said she doesn't have to leave you with hope, but I'm a priest here and I have to leave you with hope. So my hope is that we can make a change by God's leadership on us, the strength, the courage, the moral courage to speak out and do something and not accept that this is just the way of the world, that we're going to be here forever. I don't believe it, never believe that. We can transform this society for good and save lives. And now, let us go into the world rejoicing in the power of the Spirit. Hallelujah, hallelujah. A conversation with Brian McLaren and Winnie Ebenezer in the church.